Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming here. Uh, we have with us Mr. S. Narendra. He served as a close and a senior aide to former Prime Minister of India, Narasimha. He held several important positions in the government of India, including that of Principal Information Officer. And he was concurrently also the information advisor to the Prime Minister between February 1992 to July 1992. And he acted as the spokesperson of the Prime Minister as well as the Government of India from the period between 1992 and 1998. That means he continued in his position after Narasimha ceased to be the Prime Minister of India during the periods when there were other Prime Ministers, including Atal Bihari Vajpayee for 13 days, H.D. Deve Gowda, and Gujarat, Mr. Guha. Yes. So this book is like his memoirs, but I'll say it's much more than just memoirs, because it provides you an insider's view, a ringside view of what happened in the first half of the 90s and after that as well, better part of the 90s. And there's a lot of focus in his book on the changes in the economic policies, which we today call policies of economic liberalization or economic reforms that were initiated from around the middle of 1991. It was preceded by a very, very difficult and I would say a traumatic period, the period when after Vishwanath Pratap Singh's government fell, Chandrasekhar was the Prime Minister of India for a short period of time. Then we had the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi in between the two phases of elections, the Lok Sabha elections, and then the unlikely, I mean, very few people were expecting Narasimha Rao to become the Prime Minister of India, but he did. And just as his period as Prime Minister was marked by wide-ranging changes in economic policies, it was also accompanied by several controversies about which Mr. Narendra has written this book, and we'll surely get a chance to discuss these. But Mr. Narendra had the opportunity of designing and implementing the various communications policies and strategies for the Prime Minister, in particular the policies of economic reforms. He, as the head of the Press Information Bureau, he was deeply involved and privy as well to several important decisions that were taken in that period of time when Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. He has he's been a communications professional for several decades, and I'm going to ask Mr. Narendra to speak about his book, and I will be engaging him in a conversation, because this was a very, very significant period in the history of India, although all this happened 3 decades ago, because it was not just the policies of economic liberalization, it was several changes in foreign policy that happened at that period of time. This was also the period when the Babri Masjid was demolished on the 6th of December 1992. And as we mentioned earlier, there were several controversies, scandals about which we are going to talk about as this evening progresses. But before that, let me ask Mr. Narendra to speak to you a little bit.
Thank you, Paranjoy. Can everybody hear me? Good evening and welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. And thank Shubha for hosting this. And Paranjoy is a very, very busy man. Not only the author, documentary maker, media personality, and is also a very, very intrepid activist. To answer this question, why did I write the book? I was very hesitant to write the book for a long while because I was privy to a lot of things happening inside the government and outside. Also, a lot of people inside the government have written books. Those who are in the finance ministry, commerce ministry. And there is a very eminently readable book by Sripati, The Half-Life, that talks about Narasimha's journey through life and politics. I wrote this book for the ordinary person to realize how difficult it was for India to transit from a crisis, financial and economic, in 1991 to be one of the globally recognized economic hubs. I was privy, I listened to a lot of things. It's not just an insider story of what I saw, a people that I wanted to provide information which is not available generally to the outsiders, particularly researchers, might be researching the political history of India. People are only concentrating on the economic reforms. It's not just economic reform that happened in those 5-6 years. It changed the mindset of India. It freed the entrepreneurial spirit of Indians from government control. The drama that took place behind it, why certain decisions were taken or not taken, have not been explained, I think, in many of the other publications which have come out about the period. I'm trying to tell it in the story, the first person story. The focus is not me. Yes, I did participate in a lot of decisions. I was a very close observer of events that took place. But it is a slice of history that is very, very important in India's recent journey. Politically, economically, in the international field. Today, if India has got a seat at the high table in international politics and economics, it is only because of those reforms. The focus has always been that it was Dr. Manmohan Singh, the finance minister, and the commerce minister that preached the government reforms. But people do not know the master stroke of then Prime Minister. I did not know him when this happened. In fact, many newspapers wrote when I took over as his advisor that I am appointed because of the Andhra. I am not. On the 24th of July 1991, he surprised the entire nation, the Congress party, the political system, by abolishing the Industries Development and Regulation Act. It was this act that had given the government total control over the economy. It has spawned many other laws. I don't want to recount all the laws. I can recount them, but it will be boring. Very often it's criticized that we indecisively did not take decisions. But in June 1991, he authorized the devaluation of Indian rupee by 27%. The same devaluation taken place in 1966 when Indira Gandhi took office. She regretted it because there was so much of criticism. He knew that he will be attacked, he may even lose his post. But yet, he allowed the devaluation in India to end. This 1951 Industry Development Regulation Act was a holy cow because it was enacted by Prime Minister Nehru while ushering in the socialist pattern of society. To check that by a man who was appointed the Prime Minister of India as a stopgap arrangement. In fact, many people in the political system had thought he will do the dirty work, avert the crisis, then he can be pushed over, they can take over. I have not written this book. I had to upload everything in it as an acolyte. Nor did I write this book to attack him. I am trying to give a story. Therefore, it is not so much for the economists or the students of economics, this book. It is for ordinary people to understand how difficult it was for India to change from a controlled economy to a liberal and market-oriented economy. I rest here. The floor is over to my friend Paranjoy.
As Mr. Narendra pointed out, I'd like him to talk a little more about this. Narasimha Rao would address press conferences. It's interesting when you think back. Today we have a Prime Minister of India, he's the only Prime Minister of India who's never ever addressed a spontaneous press conference. He picks and chooses the persons he wants to be interviewed with. And sometimes they are not journalists, sometimes they are actors, citizens of Canada who ask him very important questions like how he like to eat his mango, आम काट के खाते हैं, चूस के खाते हैं, kind of questions. But those were different days. And in Narasimha Rao's first press conference, he used this word that the razor's edge, that he is, his government and he is surviving on a razor's edge. Crisis after crisis, including what you pointed out, India's foreign exchange reserves have plummeted to barely 2 weeks of imports. And then the devaluation happened, the abolition of the entire industry licensing system, the so-called license control Raj, which Rajagopalachari had talked about. And this was also a period of intense international turmoil. 1989, the Berlin Wall had collapsed. The erstwhile Soviet Union had broken up. Francis Fukuyama was talking about the end of history. And within the country, it was not just the run-up to the Babri Masjid, the demolition, but the turmoil in Punjab and Kashmir. So I'd like Mr. Narendra to elaborate more on how this period where the government was almost perpetually on a razor's edge. Yes.
Give one example. The militants had taken over Srinagar. They had hoisted the flag in Lal Chowk. More or less it was thought that Kashmir will go out of India's hand. Punjab, one did not know they would remain within the country of Pakistan. Come up. The other crisis was the morale of the people was at its lowest point at that point of time because of instability in the political system. The economic crisis, Mr. B.P. Singh introduced the Mandal Commission report, the agitation, there are violence everywhere. In fact, some of the South Indian newspapers with the language used to say, it is no longer safe to travel in the North India. That was the situation when this government came to power. Mrs. Gandhi in 1980 came to power with a lot of majority. She had the opportunities. There was the economic crisis, financial crisis. We went to IMF and we borrowed $5 billion. But $2 billion was drawn. Then the government developed cold feet because of criticism that they are giving up the social impact of society. Immediately, government repaid the loan and came back to the control, license permit. BBC government had just come to power. I written about it in my book. It is top level secret meeting, finance minister, Narendra, John Fernandez, P. Upendra, Mr. BBC. The new finance secretary had come from IMF. I was present. He made a presentation showing how dark was the situation. Unless reforms were implemented, the country's economy is going to collapse and the financial instability. I was asked to prepare a communication plan to communicate to the people the bad news. So I asked the government, how much bad news you want to give? If you give all the bad news, capital will go out of India. How much you want? Nobody answered that. I prepared my communication plan, gave it to INB Minister, Mr. P. Upendra, who forwarded it to the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister. After 6 weeks, the lowest officer in the Finance Ministry sent me a 3-line letter. Please return all the papers, no action need to be taken. So BBC government did not take the action. In that kind of situation, a new government has come, it did not have majority, it was not. And the Congress party was not prepared to implement the reforms. And the Prime Minister was able to withstand all the opposition, we faced all the talk, and yet change the course of India's economy and history. If you have more questions, I can elaborate on.
That had been, that was part of the security scandal spearheaded by Harshad Mehta. I'm going to come to Harshad Mehta a little later, further. But much to his surprise, Mr. Chidambaram, when he sent his resignation letter, he wasn't expecting the Prime Minister to accept it. But he did. And Mr. Narendra's book as a blow-by-blow account of what happened actually at that day. But my question is a little different. You point out how at one point of time you unsuccessfully failed to persuade Mr. Chidambaram and G.K. Mupanar to set up the Tamil Manila Congress. And how after Mr. Chidambaram's departure from the government or the Union Council of Ministers and the cabinet, the link between Sonia Gandhi and Mr. Narasimha or 10 Janpat at Racecourse Road, as it Lok Kalyan Marg used to be called those days, was broken. And the feeling that there was Mr. Narasimha Rao's government was not doing enough to probe the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. All of these led to a lot of internal tensions within Mr. Narasimha Rao's government. So the razor's edge was not just what was happening outside, what was happening inside. And even his Home Secretary, Mr. Madhav Godpure, wrote in his book about the circumstances that led to the demolition of the Babu Masjid, as well as what his Home Minister, Mr. S.V. Chauhan, had alleged that Mr. Narasimha Rao was doing nothing but watching television on the afternoon of the 6th of December 1992. So the question I have for you, Mr. Narendra, the razor's edge from within the enemy within, his opponents within, who made Mr. Narasimha Rao's life more than a little difficult.
In my book, I have given an instance where even before Narasimha became the Prime Minister, somebody took me to his agency. I had 3 meetings with him. He had been told to his agency that my media contacts were very good and if I could assist him, it will help him in politics. Mr. Arjun Singh, after assessing my loyalty, trustworthiness, etc., at last objected. We have certain papers which are very embarrassing to the then Congress President, Mr. Narasimha Rao. I want you to help me to get this to me. So then and there I told him, sir, I am a civil servant. I did not know you until 4 days ago. I do not want to get involved in the politics of your party. Please excuse me from this. Immediately said, all right, almost dismissed. Even before Narasimha became Prime Minister, both Mr. Sharad Pawar and Mr. Arjun Singh were thinking that Narasimha was on this tap arrangement. Once the dirty job of economic reforms and devaluation of the rupee has been done, they will become unpopular. And one of them could succeed to the seat of the Prime Minister. This went on throughout Narasimha's 5 years. But the politician that he was, Prime Minister Narasimha, was quite clever. In 1992, he managed to get in the All India Congress Committee his supporters in the Congress decision-making body. So whenever there was an attempt to remove him, his supporters in the Congress command would not back this. But this worked to his advantage for 1 or 2 years. But as the government entered its second, third, and fourth year, the machinations increased. Some of his own decisions are not taking decisions because of political reasons. Consciously, he did not implement the issues. For instance, there was a joint parliamentary committee that went into the stockbroker scam, known as Harshad Mehta scam. 2 of the ministers were named. Mr. Manmohan Singh was not named, nor Mr. Chidambaram.
It was Mr. Shankar Anand who was then the petroleum minister and Mr. Rameshwar Thakur.
Narasimha Rao did not want, because the state election was going up in Karnataka. Shankar Anand was a scheduled caste minister. In fact, he had replaced Mr. Jagjeevan Ram as the representative of the scheduled caste within the central government for a long time. He wanted to give an honorable exit. He delayed the issue for political reasons. That don't right. So everybody thought he is trying to protect a corrupt minister. In fact, the corruption charge against Shankar Anand himself was not very big. He was not involved in the stock market scam. He was involved in something else. He knows something.
The money of the Oil Industries Development Board.
Yes. Anyway. Then there were 3. You see, every government throughout India's history in the recent past, there have been scams and scandals. There have been 300 scams since independence. During Narasimha's government also there were 5 scams in which he himself was not involved, but his governmental people, ministers were involved. In 3 or 4, he surprised everybody by taking action which they did not expect. But in one, where the minister in charge of food had deliberately created a shortage of sugar supply to make money, and it benefited a whole lot of people. He failed to institute a proper inquiry. I had a small role in advising him against it, but he did not listen to it.
He's talking about Kalpana Raj. And also he was a union minister was also accused of harboring terrorists, yes.
And later he was sacked. But not many people know. In one of the last scams that happened when the elections were about to happen in 1996, it was known as the fertilizer scam. His own son was involved. Mr.
Yes.
Prabhakar,
And a distant relative of his as well.
a distinct relative, several of them, including Prabhakar, were involved in different ways. In fact, the court convicted most of the relatives, but spared Prabhakar. Who ordered the inquiry? Nobody knows. In my book, I have given that. When a note went to him, to the cabinet secretary, principal secretary, about the sugar scam, they recommended a high-level inquiry. His Narasimha Rao in a long hand wrote, CBI inquiry. He ordered the CBI inquiry. He did not stand in the way of this inquiry. Yet his government is granted to the most scam-ridden government.
In another respect, Mr. Narasimha Rao, in terms of scandals, he was the only Prime Minister of India who was accused of directly accepting money. The stockbroker Harshad Mehta, who died in jail, he had alleged through an affidavit that in February 1993, the peak of the security scandal, that he had personally delivered a suitcase with 67 lakh rupees, which was part of a 1 crore bribe, alleged bribe. And I'm going to come to that a little later, why he bribed him or why he allegedly bribed him. And he was at that point in time, his lawyer was Ram Jethwala. So it's quite interesting, and Mr. Narendra's book has a lot of detail about how the then Prime Minister dealt with this kind of activity, where the fingers were being pointed directly at him. And here was an eminent lawyer, also a member of parliament, and a person accused of defrauding and who eventually died in jail, making this allegation. So maybe you'd like to say a few things about that episode.
There was an accusation that Harshad Mehta had given to Narasimha Rao a crore of rupees by meeting him in his office of residence at a particular time and a particular day. The Joint Parliamentary Affairs Committee went into this, and they found that Narasimha Rao was not in the place where Harshad Mehta came. He was there to accept the money. The second question that everybody should ask is, if he had taken that money, would Narasimha Rao have ordered or prepared to accept the Joint Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament to probe the Harshad Mehta scam? In fact, I want to read this, page 57 of this book.
You leave the mic.
Hold it, hold it. I was trying to prepare Narasimha for his first press conference. I told him, I am going to ask you the question in the rudest way, the way the media asks you. He said, go ahead. So there is a rehearsal taking place in his house. Dr. Manmohan Singh was there, Mr. P. Chidambaram was there, all the finance minister officials, the principal secretary, everybody was there. I took the mic and asked him, sir, why are you running away from the crown? Have you anything to hide? Is there anything your government or anyone involved in the government has something to hide? Will you take action against anybody involved in this scam? The Narasimha answered direct. He said, I have nothing to hide. I am prepared for a judicial inquiry at the highest level or a joint parliament affairs committee group. If anyone in this room has anything to hide, this is the time to tell me. In my book again I have written, soon after this, because the finance ministry had appointed an administrator to inquire into Harshad Mehta's scam. In that meeting, Mr. Manmohan Singh and Chidambaram said, an official inquiry is on, and if you agree to a JPC or a High Court jet inquiry or a Supreme Court jet inquiry, it will delay the probe. He asked me, Mr. Narendra, would your friends and everybody accept it? I said, sir, the technical answer, it will only strengthen the impression that you are trying to cover up something, that the government has something to hide. He said, I am prepared for any kind of inquiry. If the Prime Minister accepted this kind of inquiry, would he be involved in just taking 1 crore rupees from a person who is already accused?
Divided the Indian National Congress in 1969, but there were, quote unquote, the famous JMM bribery case, Jharkhand Mukti Morcha bribery case, and the Supreme Court, in fact, came up with a judgment which is even today a landmark judgment that what members of parliament do inside the floor of the house, it's not justiciable, you cannot take action against it. So if, say for instance, one recent example, if Arvind Kejriwal on the floor of the Delhi Assembly says, ये तो अडानी का पैसा नहीं है, ये तो मोदी जी का पैसा है, ये अडानी का कंपनी नहीं है, ये मोदी जी का कंपनी है, you can't actually accuse him of defamation because he said it on the floor of the house. But the JMM bribery case is interesting because it was a minority government becoming a majority government, and after that, of course, our present rulers have overtaken all of them. You've heard about what happened in Manipur, you know what's happening in Manipur, what happened in Goa, what happened in Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, of course, before that, 5 years ago. But maybe you can comment a little bit about how he, from being a minority government, he became a majority government, and this episode, to what extent, I mean, Mr. Narasimha Rao critics would claim that this revealed his most cynical and immoral self.
It was a minority government. Lot of political advisors of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao advised him that they will manage to get the majority. Third process is not new in India. Haryana and Haryana, the very famous thing that happened in 1966 in Haryana. Only thing one could say that level of money exchange had not taken place in the central government. Indira Gandhi was had a minority government from 1969 to 1970. They managed to break away a few people from the Communist Party of India, very important people. They were given up all the things. But in the finance minister, nobody raised a finger. From a minority government to a majority government, buying up MPs. No MP anymore comes to one party to another on ideology. He pure quit and throw and go. This happened. Yes, it did sully his government's image. When the people who came were third-rate people, like Ram Lakhan Singh Yadav of Bihar.
This is the fertilizer scam. His son was accused in that.
Then Shivu Soren, he is part and parcel of Burma. It is unfortunate such people support had to be taken. Why did the opposition, when you were in the midst of economic reform, trying to avert a crisis, move this no confidence motion? If they were responsible, they should not have moved the no confidence motion at that point of time. But in 1993, soon after the Navi Masjid demolition, there was a break in the relationship between the BJP and the Narasimha, in the sense that perhaps they had certain personal equations, as a result of which they were supporting him on issue basis. For instance, they were not supporting him on all the economic reforms. Privatization, yes. Globalization, no. On their end. It did sully his image. It did weaken the government. And in my last chapter, title of the chapter itself is The Declining Slope. I recounted all this now that all what happened. This is one of the factors.
Okay. Mr. Narendra points out how May 1996, Narasimha Rao, Mr. Vajpayee, and Mr. H.D. Devi never happened before. But the so-called, all the controversies actually followed Mr. Narasimha Rao after even he ceased to be the Prime Minister. I have two questions in this regard. The first question was he a little too dependent on a rather controversial god man called Chandraswami to convince Hindu religious leaders not to demolish the Babri Masjid? That's my first question to you. I'll ask the second question after this.
From 1991 onwards, the Prime Minister wanted to bring about a peaceful resolution of Babri Masjid and Ayodhya temple controversy. In a Council of Ministers meeting in 1992 where I was present, he told all the ministers, as a Congress president and politician, I have to manage the politics of this country. I may have to meet a lot of different kinds of people for a variety of reasons. But I want to make it clear, if any one of them comes to you, including my relatives, that I want a favor to be done, it has the approval of the Prime Minister. Please check back with me. Then he called me and said, go out and brief the media of what I have said. I briefed the media in 1992 itself. This is what the Prime Minister has cautioned all his ministers. Mr. Chandraswamy did not play any role in the decision making in the other areas. He not only used Chandraswamy, he used Shekhawat, Rajasthan, Chief Minister. Then he used the former Chief Executive Officer of Tirupati Devasthanam, who had a link with all the mutts in the North India. And they go between, so that a peaceful solution to the Kaveri Masjid controversy could be found. I attended a meeting where the Muslim representatives and the Hindu Margadarshak Mandal representatives were all present there. Almost that Muslims were agreeable to give certain land near the masjid, and agreement was about to happen. But suddenly, people who were not inside the meeting were outside, who thought they will lose the importance if there is a peaceful resolution. Sabotage the whole thing. So Chandraswamy's factor, although people try to say, he was not an influence on the government decision making in many of the areas.
Okay. Or alleged influence on the then Prime Minister with Narendra Brahmachari's alleged influence on Indira. Be that as it may. There was a well-known, you mentioned this in your book, that's why I wanted you to talk about it. There was a pickle manufacturer in the United Kingdom called Laku Patel. He alleged that in 1983 he had paid 100,000 US dollars, huge amount of money today, to Chandraswamy for a contract. He said he'd swing it with the Prime Minister because of his alleged closeness with the Prime Minister. Why is this important? Because after Mr. Narasimha Rao ceased to be Prime Minister, a lower court judge actually asked him to appear in court. And this was, if I think Tisazari court or something. He never appeared there. He appeared before the judge in Vigyan Bhavan. But eventually he was acquitted. But again, we see a very, very, very unusual kind of a situation that transpired. Because by that time, he was not in power. His close confidants were no longer with him. Mr. Narendra's book talks about the famous telecom controversy involving Mr. Sukhram. By that time, Mr. Sukhram had been raided when Joginder Singh was the CBI director and Devi Gowda was the Prime Minister. And they found words of currency notes. And as the CBI was counting those notes, they realized, Mr. Sukhram didn't have time to count the notes. So many bundles which were supposed to have 100 notes actually had 95 and some had 90. Because they're all over his house. Everywhere. So these, it's interesting, and I'm going to come back to liberalization and economic reforms before I conclude. This made, the Mr. Narasimha Rao's image took a huge beating, and it diverted attention from all the economic reforms that he sought to implement. Please. Your comments. I have two last questions for you, very, very short.
Very briefly, how many people do not have a mobile phone here? Anybody please raise your hands. If you don't have a mobile phone,
How many have two SIMs in your mobile?
Wow.
you don't have a mobile phone.
Great man. Congratulations.
See, people credit the telecom revolution to watch by government, digital revolution to watch by government. The telecom reform to the toughest because there were internal opposition within the Congress party. The left parties who supported the labor unions did not want it. The BJP did not want it. But Narasimha Rao called the officials, asked them to give a special note on this. This was in March, April 1994.
I asked him, in fact, are you aware of any person who has written an autobiography where the names have been changed, the places have been changed, and it's been fictionalized? He said he wasn't aware, nor am I aware of any individual who's written an autobiography where it's been fictionalized. I actually read that book and it's strongly recommended. Parts of it read like a Hindi movie, the script of a Hindi movie, all the ingredients, all the masala in it. Sex and violence, song and dance, tragedy and comedy, in gory detail. And parts of it read like a boring lecture on how is the Rajya Sabha constituted, what's the first preference vote, what's the second preference vote. It's an amazing book. Because chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter X and chapter Y, they all deal with very, very different subjects. And if you recall, and since dead men tell no tales and tell no lies, when Vinod Mehta launched Outlook magazine in October 1995, he started with an excerpt from Insider, which was subsequently, it was a draft, so it was changed, which might be published. And since they are all dead, nobody can contradict me. It was allegedly leaked to him by Nikhil Chakravarti, the editor of Main Street, who Narasimha Rao trusted and wanted him to read a bit of it and to give his opinion on it. The question that I have for Mr. Narasimha, question, I once asked Mr. Narasimha Rao, I interviewed him after his book, because he was very keen that the book be read by people. I kept asking about Babri Masjid, he said, no, I will not answer your question. And I spoke with him a little before he passed away. And he came through, I felt sad. Because he said, I'll always be a congressman. I cannot be anything other than a congressman. Yet, the Congress party had treated him very badly. I'm sure he hasn't written about it, but it's common knowledge what happened to him after he passed away. So, it's very, very poignant, I feel, that here was a man, you like him, you don't like him, you hate him, you love him, but surely that period, the first half of the 90s, had an important impact on India, its economy, its politics, whatever. And so I'd like to just make a few comments and observations on this aspect of my observations.
I have nothing to say about his Insider book. Because he wanted to write about all this using a assumed name. That's because he did not want to hurt the feelings of various people like Mrs. Gandhi, Chenna Reddy and others, who all he treated at various points. Coming back to what you said in the epilogue, I mentioned in 1991, nobody gave a chance to India that will survive even as a democracy or as an economy. By 1996, if you read Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat, he starts the book with India. In most of the international magazines, Mrs. Gandhi tried her best to get the best coverage in international media. It did not happen. Here, without anything, any attempt, without spending any money, in fact, US government has spent money to improve the image of India abroad. India's image on its own started reflecting Most of the international newspapers, magazines started featuring on the front page India. The foreign correspondence score in India was about 20. The real foreign correspondents, not those who developed as foreign correspondents. It increased to 60. And many of them made India the base for Southeast Asia. Otherwise, normal base we used to go to Singapore or Thailand. India's image suddenly became something different from the snake charmers or the Kumbh. He gave economic content to Indian diplomacy, which was missing throughout the Nehru era and Indira Gandhi era. Nobody cared about India. You were criticized for non-alignment, etc. Narasimha Rao became the chairman of the non-alignment movement. Nobody criticized him. He redefined non-alignment. Southeast Asia was the most neglected area. I was a foreign correspondent in that area for 5 years. I had difficulty in getting visas for my travel because I was an Indian official. But all the Southeast Asian nations started voting India because suddenly they discovered an economic opportunity in India as a counter to China. Otherwise, they were highly dependent on China. Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, came to India about during the Manmohan Singh period. For the first time, she started using Indo-Pacific. Otherwise, Indo-Pacific was not a concept in US because they wanted to draw India into the Pacific Ocean. India did not apply for a membership of the ASEAN when the door was open or what is known as Asia Pacific Economic Community. APEC. Western or tried his best, we got an observer status in 1986. How did we get the observer status? Because we counted economically, not politically. This was the legacy of Narasimha. Yes, many people say his legacy is Babri was demolished and he did not act. They forget that Kashmir was going away from India and was brought back. How did he do that? There's a whole chapter, step by step, brick by brick, from 93 when he was the political doghouse. He worked through international diplomacy and internal diplomacy. It was amazing to see. I was a member of the committee he constituted to go to Kashmir and deal with it. I used to go every month. And the way he used to guide us how to go about it. Today, look at say Kashmir. They still have questions through. Nobody gives credit for Punjab.
It's not a state in any case.
No, it's not a state.
It's not a union
It is a
territory.
state of affairs. So, what I want to conclude is history, people said, will be kind to Narasimha. So far, I don't think any historian has really recorded what all the things happened in the economic reform, the range, the extent. I have tried to capture that here as a record, not to praise him or anything, but despite all the odds, how every sector of the government was touched by liberalization, economic reforms. And on that, successor governments have built and claiming credit. Today, Vande Bharat Express, everybody applauded it, excellent train. How did it happen? It was Narasimha Rao regime that started what is known as the uni-gauge system. Otherwise, we had multiple gauges. It revolutionized the logistics industry in India. Without uni-gauge, the logistic industry could not have taken off. That is another contribution. I tried to slightly outline some of these. I hope somebody will develop on it more certainly.
There has been a biography of him, and he came back. Usually, I look at it. on PV Narasimha. Mr. Narendra, where he comes from, it's not surprising that he is rather empathetic towards Narasimha Rao and many others, including myself. Before I had this conversation with him, Mr. Narasimha Rao said, I remain quite critical of him. But this book for me reveals a lot of what was happening within him. And that's why I would urge all of you who are interested in that phase of contemporary Indian history to go through it. I mean, today it seems we're living in a different India, and it's just 2.5 decades away. My last question. Before I started this conversation, Mr. Narendra sent me an email. Would you like to tell me what outline for me some of the questions you would like to ask me? I wrote back to him and I said, Mr. Narendra, let's keep it spontaneous. I'll ask you questions as a journalist or a reviewer would to an author and a government officer. So I've tried to be faithful to my duty. I have no more difficult questions to ask him. I have one very easy question to ask him. And after that, please feel free to ask him. Towards the end of the book, you actually point out why his government failed to be re-elected in 1996, why he lost the election, and why, despite his best efforts and with help from his communication advisors like you, to project economic liberalization as something that was not pro-rich and anti-poor. Would you agree with me if I say that despite his best efforts, despite his best intentions, one of the reasons why the Narasimha Rao government and the Congress government failed to come to power in 1996, that he was not successful in convincing large sections of the population that his economic policies were not pro-rich.
Let me be very brief. The economic success for the political failure. In 1992, before I was appointed as the information advisor, I did not know anything. Suddenly there was some kind of a vote from my own colleagues and others to ensure that I was not elevated to the post of the So a senior official in the PMO, Prime Minister's office, called me and said, after 3 days, you have to make a presentation to Prime Minister Narasimha about how the government is communicating economic reforms. I said, that's not my job, that's the job of the IT minister. I handle only a small portion of the governmental publicity. He said, no, you have to make it. The minister admitted himself to nursing home on the day of the presentation. The secretary made he was ill. Only I was left alone to go. And very frankly, I told Prime Minister, sir, if you depend on Doordarshan or official media for communication, you will not be a success. What is required is political communication. Even cabinet ministers are not speaking about economic reforms. Only Manmohan Singh is talking and Chidambaram is talking mostly in English media. The language media is talking a different language altogether. And he said, all the more I need people like you, because I don't have anybody who is speaking up. So that evening, a meeting was set up, and he asked me frankly, what do you think is your role? I told him, my role is inside the government I represent the media, outside I represent the government. I'll be a devil's advocate. I want the freedom to tell you frankly what the perception of the public is. What is the political decision you take, orders you give, I'll carry out. But I should have that freedom. He said, please do that. She was the only one who was talking of what is known as the human face of economic reforms. He deliberately put both Chidambaram and Manmohan Singh in the front as the face of the reforms, so that any criticism coming goes to technical people. Both of them did not have a political base. He will concentrate on agriculture, agro industries, rural development, social welfare, women's welfare, so that the human side of reforms he represents. The economic reforms which are not popular is represented by the technocrats. I have a whole chapter on that, why he did not give his time, his name. His government fell not only because the economic reform not communicated. Firstly, the people for the last 40 years before the reforms were cultured in the thinking that everything should be done by the government. The airport should be built by the government, roads should be built by the government. To change that mindset was very difficult. They did not want the private sector to have a role, and foreign investment particularly was really hated. It could not have been popular had it tried to communicate. But nobody spoke other than Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh, and Chidambaram to the people in this country. The chief ministers who were Congress chief ministers failed to communicate the economic reforms. Today, states are in the forefront of economic reforms. They are the biggest beneficiaries. But none of them tried to communicate the benefits of economic reforms. His failure was on account of Babri Masjid. How did it happen? The Muslims were alienated. And the Hindu agenda went to the benefit of the BJP. So the Congress fell between the two stools. Thank you.